This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Some of you might be very familiar with Old Dominion University. Some of you might have heard about it, but you don't know much about the university. It's a university in Norfolk, Virginia, and it has about 24,000 students for the 2019 academic year, according to the latest stats. So it's one of the bigger universities. There's a professor at Old Dominion University who wrote a book titled, let me get the title here, A Long Dark Shadow, Minor Attracted People and Their Pursuit of Dignity. Minor Attracted People and Their Pursuit of Dignity. This is a self-identified transgender professor who thinks it's time to quit stigmatizing and criticizing and charging and being upset and angry with pedophiles, adults who prey upon children. We're not talking about children that get interested in playing doctor and nurse. We're talking about adults knowing exactly what they're doing. And here's this professor at Old Dominion saying we need to destigmatize them. Spencer Lindquist is a contributor to the Federalist, and he wrote an article on that. Spencer, glad to have you on board, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, let's break this thing down in a little bit more detail. This book that he's pushing out there, and first of all, what's the reaction of the university from this professor in the book and the reaction it's causing?
Well, the university, their response was not only inadequate, it was insulting. They came out and gave a statement in support of this assistant professor of sociology and criminology, Alan Walker. And what this is proving is that this eating away at our culture, at our morality, this is something that's happening, and it's backed by institutions. It's backed by institutions like public universities, like Old Dominion. And that really is one of the worst and scariest, most frightening aspects of this whole ordeal.
The idea to, and you point out in your article, and again, this is a piece that appears in the Federalist written by Spencer Lindquist, that you say his attempt to legitimize non-offending pedophiles isn't the first of its kind. Before I go any deeper, when we say non-offending pedophiles, what do you mean? They haven't been charged?
So non-offending pedophiles, that's the language. That's the language specifically, not my language, but the language of people like Alan Walker. And there's also articles from Vice that I was referencing. Vice had a series of articles on what they called non-offending pedophiles, and these were people who claimed to be attracted to children but who had not acted on that. But as you read the Vice articles, it turns out that actually one of these so-called non-offending pedophiles was actually somebody who had been alleged to have committed a sexual assault of a young girl that he actually adopted. And there was another so-called non-offending pedophile who actually admitted that he worked in close contact with children on a daily basis. So I think we have to have a grain of salt here. They try and frame it as non-offending pedophiles. I'm not so sure. It's not a risk that I or I believe any sane person is willing to take.
No, I mean, what they're trying to do is say something like, well, you could shoot somebody, so we should charge you because you could be a shooter, but you haven't. You're a non-offending shooter at this point, or rapist, or whatever crime, so well, obviously you're not going to call somebody a rapist unless they're being charged with it, or a shooter, whatever. But pedophilia, that's an entirely different story.
It is, absolutely. And this is what we're seeing. There is no off switch to what the left calls progress or to tolerance. They use the word tolerance, and it's one of their favorite words. But tolerance isn't a virtue. It's entirely dependent on what we're trying to tolerate. And right now they want to tolerate pedophilia, and they're calling it MAPS, minor attracted people. But this is just one more instance of the left using this insultingly euphemistic language. They call illegal aliens undocumented immigrants.
Right.
They've gone after people protesting critical race theory parents. They've tried to designate them as domestic terrorists. So they manipulate language, and this manipulation of language is one that acutely acutely threaten the dignity and the safety of children, as well as just the basic standards of morality that are still remaining in our society.
And we know the left has been doing a lot of that on different levels, and we're certainly aware of the harm that can cause. But in a case like this, I mean, you just want to kind of gloss over the fact that if an adult sexually abuses a child, but of course they don't look at it like that. Well, let me put it this way. Decades ago, I did a piece with Nambia in San Francisco. I was doing a piece for a television station I worked, which we called The Last Taboo, and that was involving incest. And North American Men Boys Association, I decided to go out and do an interview with them. And I'm sitting there doing this interview, listening to this guy tell me why it's perfectly okay, and in fact is a good idea for a grown man, say of 30, 40 years of age, to take a 5-year-old boy or girl and show them life.
It's absolutely disgusting.
Yes, it is.
And the worst part about it is that right now, I mean, you've got cancel culture, and you can be canceled for, speaking out against critical race theory. You could be canceled for using biologically accurate pronouns. You could be fired for refusing the vaccine. But the problem with cancel culture isn't just that it exists; it's that we're not able to cancel the right people right now. You need to be able to cancel pedophilia. You need to be able to maintain the stigma around abusing children. But when you have this type of institutional support from academia for this type of disgusting rhetoric, it really shows the dire state of the decline of academia and, more broadly speaking, the power structures in our country.
The author of this from Old Dominion, his book again, A Long Dark Shadow, Minor Attracted People and Their Pursuit of Dignity. He says he does have, and you point out in your article, that there are other organizations that would stand with him. I'm not talking about just people here and there, but organizations that come forward and say, yes, he's on the right track. We support and applaud.
That's right. There's organizations there's one called Before You Act, and there's another one called the Prostasia Foundation. And both of these try and build themselves as organizations that are trying to stop sexual abuse of children. But when you do a little bit more digging, when you dig a little bit deeper, you see that in both cases, these organizations have cozied up and have worked with and worked alongside and actually have had people on their staff who've been registered sex offenders who abused and molested children. So they're trying to tell us that, no, they're actually trying to stop pedophilia. But all the indicators point in the direction of them actually trying to normalize it, which is something that if conservatives are going to conserve anything, we have to be conserving the dignity and the safety of children. And we do that by pointing out that tolerance is not a virtue, particularly when we're trying to be forced to tolerate the most disgusting and despicable actions imaginable.
And when we're talking about the youngest of the children, they don't know that that's not life. I mean, they don't know. I mean, and again, is going back to when I was doing that report on incest. I mean, young children exposed to that in their own household, they didn't know that it's not like that in every household until they get older. I remember at that time, this was before the internet, getting a letter from a woman who signed herself off as an 88-year-old grandmother of 7 or 8 at that time, saying, I didn't know for many years that what was happening was wrong. But when you get organizations like this, now they got the internet and the way to push their story out there. And I know we're giving additional publicity, but I want to shine a light on it to expose it and watch them run. When I see, when you quote one line from this organization that we see minor attracted people as whole human beings, not as criminals or deviants who need to be controlled. I say the hell with that.
Absolutely. That is the type of deviancy that does need to be controlled more than anything else. This is deviancy. It does need to be controlled, and we need to maintain this stigma against it, because if we don't, we're sacrificing the dignity and the safety and the spiritual well-being of the most vulnerable among us.
There's a section on one of these websites that you point out, too, that even campaigns against dolls, or are we talking about dolls children play with?
Unfortunately, we're not talking about dolls children play with. I'll watch what I say since we're on the airwaves. But These are dolls that are used for different purposes, and not for children, not for adult purposes, shall we say. But they are modeled in some cases after children, which certainly encourages pedophilic activity. And this one foundation, the Prostasia Foundation, this is actually the organization that was hosting a talk with this assistant professor at Old Dominion, Alan Walker. They've come out and campaigned for the legalization, for the continued legal status of these dolls. Which I believe just says everything that we need to see. It can't be any more clear where their priorities lie.
Well, it sounds like they're trying, in the last 30 seconds, like they're trying to do something right. That you have to be at least 13 to be part of our chat room. I mean, as if that solves anything. I'm glad you put a spotlight on this. And I can't believe the reaction of Old Dominion. I got to tell you, if I had a student at Old Dominion, I'd yank them out yesterday. Thanks again, Spencer, for your time and sharing this story with us, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. Spencer Lindquist, a contributor to the Federalist. And again, this is a piece you can read yourself, and I encourage you to do so. Some sickness going on out there. They want to peddle as its normal behavior. At what point do we say, the hell it is, and we put a stop to it? All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, going to bring you up to speed on the Rittenhouse trial and where it's going and some strange things that happened.
You can hear podcast of this program at Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook.